It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to record and do this interview with you live here with Anne Ireland. She just wrote the book The Blue Guitar, which actually is a book that takes place in a festival similar to this in Montreal, a guitar festival and competition. And yeah, well, I guess to open up, what is the book about generally? What's your the synopsis, I guess, in your words?
It's about, well, it's about a competition somewhat similar to this one. I did attend as a viewer the GFA here in 2004. And so it's about what brings people to do such a goofy thing, which is to come and participate in a classical guitar competition. And so my characters come from all walks of life, and they're all different ages. And so what's at stake for them? Is it a shot where they might have a real shot at an international career, or is it something that can jimmy up a moribund career? And actually one of my characters was someone a bit like me, middle-aged woman who'd been playing bar mitzvahs and weddings, and this was a chance to suddenly, wham, hit the gong. And so it interested me. Still does.
What initially, I guess, inspired you to actually write the book about classical guitar?
Well, I was taking lessons. It was about, I don't know, about 12 years ago. I started taking lessons with Steve Thachek, and I really got into it. And I started going to master classes, never to participate, because I always be way too scared, but just to watch other people participate. And I went to a lot of recitals, and I'd go to the Toronto Guitar Society concerts, and then there'd be the party at the Kastner's house afterwards, so I'd often meet the artists and so on. And so I just got, as people do often, particularly writers, I got obsessed with it all, and I started to gather the stories. And I spoke to so many guitarists over, I guess, probably about a 5-year period. And I started to gather the stories, and I just started to imagine myself. I mean, I never could do this, ever. I just watching the guys doing the semifinals. My nerves are just totally shot. I just don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. It seems so hard. I mean, I get to sit in a room and work for years on end. Nobody sees me.
Yeah, it's a little easier behind closed doors, I guess, than having a room full of people and judges and
well, it is
scribbling. And,
I mean, I send this book out in the world, and sure, people write critiques and so on, and they're totally free to do that. But while they're doing that, I can be home. Yeah. Safely at home, sitting in my kitchen, drinking tea.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily affect how you're writing it at the time, you know.
Well, no.
Getting critique after the fact is
no.
a much different thing, I suppose.
It's so less immediate.
So what other, you've obviously worked with Steve Thachek in getting material and writing the book. Were there any other guitarists that...
Yeah, okay, over that time, I also took some lessons with Aaron Brock, who tragically died very young, and who else? Anna Graham, and then I interviewed people such as, let me just check the names. Okay, Lily Afshar, I interviewed, and Peter McCutcheon here in Montreal, because he'd been a judge for the GFA, I think, and so I wanted to know the judge's point of view. And Dennis Azabajik, is that how you pronounce his name? Yes. I also spoke to him at great length. And they were great. They're all great, so great in helping me out here.
How much of the book, I mean, you have experience playing, you've been taking lessons. How much were you able to use based on your own experience and even just visualizing going up there versus kind of finding out secondhand from other people what it's like to be in a competition setting?
Well, I guess it's a mixture of both, because I never played in front of anyone except Steve. So probably like most novelists, I'm imagining myself as the characters. So even if my character was a 29-year-old male, I'm thinking, what would it be like to be Toby walking out on that stage after having had a breakdown on stage in Paris 10 years earlier and having been hiding for 10 years. So if I were Toby, what would I feel like? So I think that's how novelists work. We do this sort of pod person taking over the body, taking over the mind, taking over the psychology.
Yeah. What did you find was the most difficult part about creating these characters or writing the book? What was the biggest challenge in your opinion?
You know, just like writing any kind of literary fiction, I think it was getting the voices. Because when you meet people in real life, it takes time to get to know them. You have a first impression of them and a sense of what their style might be, whether you might like them. But it actually takes a long time to know somebody. Well, ditto for writing a book. So I can have first impressions of characters and a sense of how they speak and how they talk and how they think, but it develops over time. So I'm rewriting these things. I mean, I probably rewrote this whole thing 20 times. I have thousands and thousands of pages that went into the delete.
You described, I think in another interview actually of yours I was reading, you described the perfect conditions for writing as, you know, being sequestered in a cabin or something like that. You're from Toronto. That's pretty much as far from a cabin in the woods as you can get. What? How do you achieve a good environment for writing? How do you?
I don't. It doesn't exist really. It's like any kind of artist, you make do with what you've got. And so for 5 minutes, I might have it might be really quiet. And I might have a stack of money on the side of my desk and some food. Okay, that might last for 5 minutes. And then it's back to real life. And so I think it's all a matter of how do you sashay through life, creating your own moment as you go amongst all the imperfection. And so this perfect artist life does not exist. Well, tell me about it. Does it? Maybe you know.
Well, I haven't had that yet, so I don't know. Maybe
yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, unless I win a major competition, which... Yeah.
But even then, you might decide, I don't like staying in hotels. Oh, I don't like airplanes. You just don't know.
Well, it was interesting. I was talking to Marchandila this morning, who's here for the festival, and I actually asked him too, like, what do you think of touring and having the musician's life and being on the road? And he actually really liked being in the hotels and loved the life on the road, which a lot of people actually don't like so much. So maybe it is possible. I don't know.
Yeah, or you might love it for a while and then not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that, I guess, guitarists or even just any classical musicians will subject themselves to so many nerves and maybe even potentially have a breakdown or lose some of the fun aspects of playing? Sometimes, I mean, competitions can be good, but at the same time, it can be a little bit of it might even make your nerves shot. Why do you think they...
Well, it does take a certain temperament, and I notice, I mean, a lot of people, I think, just do not enter competitions, and they go on and have wonderful careers. And it's the sense of a competition doesn't suit their temperament. Why do people do that? Well, I think maybe that's why I wrote the book, is because I was investigating why do people do it, and what happens to them as they're doing it, and what can possibly go wrong. In fact, it's probably not a great book to read if you're going to give a recital or be in a competition pretty soon, because it makes you feel a little bit, no, because I really go into that moment when you're walking on stage and the lights are coming and you can't see the audience. I always found that very frightening, to get on a stage when it has those hot lights, and then there's this little chair sitting over there, and you make and then you hear somewhere, but actually you don't see them. So it's like this completely mysterious, creepy world. So I'm sorry, I'm not trying to creep you out, all those of you.
Anyone competing tomorrow?
Anyone competing tomorrow? I'm sure you'll be totally chill with it.
Well, I mean, yeah, you did a really good job in the book too of capturing the nerves and everything that they go through. I mean, we were just talking about being outside of the competition today and how, you know, even just being around people competing, it can be, you can feel that there's, you know, no matter how relaxed or how prepared someone goes in, there's going to be some element of that nervousness. But I found it, just after reading the book and experiencing here, I was like, wow, you did hit it quite well there. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot at stake because, I mean, obviously, if you mess up on stage, nothing terrible is going to happen. But it is an instance in life, unlike so much else in life, where you really are walking into a situation where you're trying your hardest. You really are trying your best. And most of the time in life, we're not doing that. Most of the time we're skating over surfaces. You know, we cook a good enough dinner, and we shovel the walk well enough. So this is an instance that it seems to me it's very heightened in drama for that reason.
Yeah. Was there anything in particular when you're writing the book that resonated with you? Whether it be, you know, a particular character that you might have related to, or if you were picking one, or...
Well, sure. It was the middle-aged woman who could totally change her life. So there she is. She's doing catering jobs for these really fussy architects who are, one's vegan and one's this and one's that. And so she's doing that to make money. She has twin boys who are teenagers and who are mostly skipping school and doing lots of drugs. Nothing like my son. And so, and her husband had been an artist, and they had this whole plan when they got married that they would have this salon. But he gets a job being a guard in a place much like the art gallery in Toronto. And he's totally cool with that. He doesn't want to be an artist anymore. And in fact, he collects vintage lunch boxes. And at one point she thinks, I never thought I'd be married to a guy who collect vintage lunch boxes as his hobby. And so she's just sensing, she's in the book, she's probably, I think she's about 47. And so she's thinking, if I were to enter the thing, just to make it even past the original first call, it would be so fabulous. And so she's living out a kind of fantasy. And so I never would have had the courage to do this. So I was living through her a bit, and just to see how successful she might be, because no, she's not this fabulous, talented genius. However, even someone who has worked very hard and is moderately talented can have a fabulous day and can just play the recital of their life. And so I wanted to feel that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. It was a good underdog kind of character, and I found myself kind of rooting for her as well at certain points.
Thank you, Jonah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Blessings
you can take
on
that as a personal compliment if you want. Yeah. Do you feel that there are any, I guess, problems with how competitions treat potential talent, or do you think if you were judging, what would you look for more or less, or what would you think would be the best criteria?
Interesting question. Having just come out from the watching semifinals, I was thinking, because I was sitting beside the judges and I could hear the scratching of pens, and I'm wondering, what are they writing down? I mean, I've sat on, excuse me, a lot of literary juries in my life where we are judging books, we're judging novels and creative nonfiction. And it's just very interesting, those kinds of conversations, because what is very important to one juror may not be quite so important to another juror. It's really hugely subjective. And often you can just think your fellow jurors are insane. You don't really think this one's good. You can't possibly think that. And yet they think it's fabulous, and this is someone that you respect who's published, quantities of books. And so it wasn't too hard for me to segue from being a literary jurist to being a music jurist, and then I spoke to people who had been doing adjudications, and it just felt like a very familiar ambiance to me. And of course, I think in a competition like this, fabulous technique and even a certain showiness does get points, rather than that more ruminative, quieter, possibly more musical way of playing. And I think that's really hard. How do you judge one of those against the other? I just wouldn't really know. I mean, it's very tricky. And so certainly a lot of the musicians balance program between something that is more ruminative and more interior with something that's just, in the writing world, well, actually, the writing world is not so hugely different, because it's quite awards-driven in recent years. It didn't used to be. But nowadays, your publisher is just waiting for the nomination period and see if you get nominated. And then you feel personally responsible if you don't get nominated for something. So it's a funny old world, isn't it?
Yeah, you described some of the competitors that travel, and there's high hopes that they'll come back home with first place or something, and they don't. And would you compare it to that kind of?
Well, you do feel like you're perhaps letting people down a little. I mean, I have a character in here called Armand, who's German, who's in his early 30s, and he's been to umpteen competitions like this. And once he got in the finals. Once. And so forever he will be going to these further competitions, hoping to nail down the finals again. And the others are already starting to back up from him a little bit, thinking, uh-oh, I don't want to be like that. A guy who just keeps going year after year after year and never really hitting the gong.
Another thing I kind of wanted to ask about that I mentioned earlier was you also coupled this with the SARS epidemic.
Right.
Was there a particular reason or anything that you felt translated between the two, or was it just you felt like including it?
Felt like including it. It all felt sort of viral. I didn't want all the action of the story to be inside the guitar competition because that felt too claustrophobic. And I wanted to give a sense of what characters' lives were like in a larger context. And so they had lovers at home, wherever home might be. And so home is still a presence even while they're at the competition. And so in the case of the SARS epidemic, Jasper, who's working in health sciences, I guess you could say, in Toronto during the SARS-like epidemic, is the lover of Toby, who's one of the guitarists. And so there's conversations back and forth between them, and I actually show Jasper back at home dealing with people who have strange memory problems and brain problems as a result of being very, very ill. And so there was a lot of containment of how to get your brain working solidly again. It felt like there was some kind of a resonance with musicians keeping it together, particularly this one, Toby, having to not let the virus get you.
Do you feel that that's the main way, like winning a competition is the best way for a musician to start a career? Or do you think it's probably an easier way, or do you think that there are other ways to go about?
Oh, I'm sure there's other ways to go about it. I think a lot of people can just say, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do it my way. Mm-hmm. And that's completely legitimate. I think probably the advantage of competitions is it can take you from 0 to 10. So you can be working away in your town and no one's really heard of you, and you can be doing whatever it is you're doing, and then you can win an important competition, suddenly you're 10. And that's a huge jump, and you did it in a weekend. And so I think in that sense, for someone whose temperament can handle that, it would be a fabulous jump start. And just as long as people don't go on thinking that it's always a competition, that every time you go out on a stage that, and sometimes you hear, oh, I really want to nail that guy, that's not interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have a problem with the concept of a music competition. I mean, personally, do you think it's overall, do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it might pit people against each other too, and sometimes hurt the relationship between musicians at all?
I'd like to talk to some musicians about that, yes. Well, I suspect there's bound to be all kinds of jealousies, and do you hope that your fellow musicians mess up? Maybe a little tiny bit, maybe. And is that a good way to approach listening to music? Hoping that a lot of buzzes mount up? I don't know. It is, it's not the natural way to listen to music. When I listen to music, it feels like a gift. I'm just so grateful. Someone is playing and I'm listening and, oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not sitting there, buzz on that G sharp, or, he made a sound when the bar chord went up the neck. To me, that's gone. Music is ephemeral. Here today, gone the next second.
What are some of your favorite guitarists to listen to?
Well, I guess I like David Russell a whole lot. But, I always go back to guitarists that when I was just starting to listen to guitars, so I was very young, maybe 10, 11, 12, and our house we had all these Julian Bream in vinyl. And that guy, I gotta say, he still tops in my eyes, in my ears. There's something about the soulfulness of his playing. And then I read the book, On the Road, I think, with Julian Bream. And the way he had a kind of not too airy-fairy notion of being a musician, the musician's life, felt natural to me. And then I saw him a few times. I saw John Williams on his first tour of Canada, and Chris Park, I think, on his first tour of Canada. But then I just didn't listen to any classical guitar for a really, really long time. And then when I started taking lessons again about 10, 12 years ago, started listening again, and listening to a lot of Canadians and whoever comes through the Toronto Guitar Society. And so don't ask me to be really smart about naming names.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are great
Those are
guitarists,
good.
obviously.
Yeah.
Any particular composers that you like to listen to, or what?
Toru Takemitsu, my favorite composer.
Okay.
Yeah, for guitar, but I heard him for orchestral stuff. I heard him on pieces like November Steps, and I means love, and just these voices. They go I. Yeah, it was great. And also, he does those pieces for guitar, and like he actually takes Beatles songs, which is I usually hate it when they take popular songs and turn them classical, but he's such an interesting composer. So, and then in the more traditional guitar literature, well, am a suck for a lot of the, you know, Albanese and Tárrega and those kinds, and Bach is probably my fave. And from the time I was 6 years old, when I was taking piano lessons, I remember my teacher, he had two pianos at the conservatory, one beside the other, and so I was really, really shy. And he'd say, "What do you want to play for next week?" I don't know. And so he'd start to play opening bars of various pieces in the Royal Canadian Conservatory book, and I just sit there and go. Then he'd say, "How about this one?" And then he'd get to Bach. Yeah, and so that's what I did. I just remember that, just never speaking.
Just nod for
nodding yes until Bach came along.
Yeah. I thought maybe we could open up, see if anyone else has any questions or.
Yeah, feel free if you want to ask
Like
anything.
to know.
Anything you want to know? Yeah.
Might not be a fair question, but blue guitar?
Blue guitar. During the time I was writing it, I had a bunch of titles, and one of them was the competition, and just various titles. And then publisher was Yoo-Hoo, Title Time, and then I recalled one of my favorite Wallace Stevens poems, which I do quote at the beginning. And so it actually came from this Wallace Stevens poem. But then I also had a peeling poster, you know, all know the Picasso painting, you know, the Blue Period one, which is actually called Old Man with Guitar. It's not called the Blue Guitar, but it always evokes, because it's the Blue Period, it always evokes the blue guitar. And then also just, I suppose, the idea of blues guitar music that's talking from dark places inside you. And some of the people in here get into some dark places. So all of these things, plus I like the color blue. I had this idea of a blue cover, so I had to make that work.
I wondered, did you know the ending? And I don't know if everyone's read it, so I
Right.
don't want to give it away. Did you know the ending when you started, or did that evolve as the characters
Wow.
developed?
I'm trying to remember.
And I too was rooting for Lucy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know all my buddies.
But I'm a mother of a teenager who plays, so it's a balance.
Yeah, no, I did not know. This ending came on later. No, it would not have been there from the get-go. Unlike writers, a writer like John Irving knows his final scene word for word before he starts writing his books. To me, that's so... I can't imagine it, because I write a book to find out what happens. I mean, I wrote this book to see who wins. If I knew who won, I mean, if you came to this thing knowing who the winners were going to be, there'd be just no drama whatsoever in this whole weekend. So ditto for writing. If I'm going to spend endless years writing something, I need to keep myself interested.
Any other questions for now?
Patrick?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about like what you think about sort of sitting in front of people and talking about your work. It's kind of similar to sitting in front of people and sharing your like practice pieces on guitar, because this seems to not like this would probably bother me a lot more than sitting in front of people and playing guitar.
Oh, really? Really? Why? Okay, that's interesting. Well, I feel, I mean, it's not necessarily comfortable, but it's not a performance in that same way. I mean, there's nothing rehearsed. Jonah and I didn't even rehearse a bit. So I don't have a sense of, like, when you were in the hallway practicing, you probably then wanted to go inside the room and duplicate the best of what you did in the hallway. And there's none of that in this kind of a situation, because there was nothing to duplicate. It was just, we came in, it was just air. And I know that freaks some people out, but also, I mean, if my hand were shaking a little bit, it's just not going to mess up the whole thing, right? But I mean, if you're going out to play guitar, your hand shake, all you're going to get is the weird sounds, right?
Right.
See, because we do different things, I just have total admiration for what you do. And I guess, yeah, maybe you think that what I'm doing is odd. Patrick was in we made a book trailer. Nowadays in the book trade you need to do little videos like a movie trailer. And so Patrick was in the book trailer we did at the back of the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto.
Oh.
And with Sean Pickup and Alina Granina.
Does anyone else have any questions? Or?
What was the initial inspiration to go to a guitar competition? Had you ever been to such a large competition before?
No, not at all. I guess at that point I knew I was writing the book because I was working with Steve Thachuk and getting interested in the psychology of these things and the psychology of musicians. And it just happened the GFA was coming to Montreal, which was, you know, not unhandy to Toronto. And so I came to that pen and pad in hand, cognizant that I was gathering stories. Cognizant, in fact, too bad I'm getting so many great stories this weekend. I've already written the book. I have just fabulous stories I've got. However, unless I write a sequel.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good reason.
Yeah. Anything else?
I've got a follow-up to that. Is that GFA was in 2004 here in Montreal. And you said you came prepared, pen and paper in
Yes.
hand. So how much time before the 2004 GFA had you been thinking of this idea? Or was it just kind of spur of the moment?
No, not spur of the moment. Probably about 2 years.
Okay.
I think, yeah, probably about 2 years. And I was so proud of myself because I listened to all of the semifinals and the finals, and I chose all the people that the judges did in every case, and I chose the winner and the runner-up. I nailed everything down exactly what they did, and so I was really pleased with myself. I don't know what it meant, but it felt like it should mean something.
Between that and the book, you could be an honorary judge. Or
An honorary judge. Well, I guess it was so interesting because I remember in the finals there was one guy that was flashier, and then one guy that was really, really good, but seemed to be more musical. And so I was trying to think, okay, what's going to affect the judges? And I ended up choosing the one that the judges chose, which was actually, I think, the more musical one. But it's just like, it's, you know, when you're trying to figure out if spaghetti's cooked, you throw the noodles at the wall and you see what sticks. So actually behind our stove we have noodle sculptures, these bas-relief of spaghetti noodles. So it was just a matter of, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it was a matter of putting these ideas and thoughts at the wall and seeing what sticks and hardened into a fossilized moment.
It's a good metaphor for
work on that
classical guitar
metaphor.
competition. Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. Sorry, I keep interjecting here, but
Yeah, it's okay.
it's just an amazing coincidence because when I decided to invite you to come here, I had no idea what your source of inspiration was. And in 2004, Jérôme, who was a judge this weekend, was one of those finalists. That's the year that he picked up third. And I was one of the invited artists to play in the gala show. So there's this connection between what's going on this weekend and your book. It's just really strange. It also goes to show how small and contained the classical guitar world really is.
I guess so, yeah, it is. Much like the literary world.
Yeah. So anyway, all of us guitarists, thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts to give such beautiful attention to the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And thanks for inviting me, by the way, Patrick. It's been having a ball.
Thanks.
Yeah.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Just to have all this guitar lore and guitar talk, filling my ears, it really is fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the book is great for not just classical guitarists, though, but any musician who's been in a competition setting or going through, trying to launch a career. Like, I think it could be really relatable for a lot of people.
I like to think it'd be relatable for anyone who is performing in any sense of the word. Anyone who's worked on something hard and then has to set forth on a stage or in something like a stage to see how it goes. And, you know, sometimes it doesn't go well. So what's that like? That's actually way more interesting from a novelist's point of view. A writer's point of view, for us, when things don't go well, that's where the content is. When things go well, there's very little content. Same as when, if you have a friend who goes away on a trip, and then they come back and they say, oh, I just had the most fabulous time in Thailand. Well, it's really hard. You say, oh yeah, so, oh, just best food, beautiful weather. Well, your eyes start to close because it's just not interesting. But if they say, typhoon, there was a typhoon, then you got a story. And so, like, they were rained on for their whole 2 weeks, and they actually maybe were hiding in you know, under leaves, underground in a basement or something. However, that's content. So just always remember, when things go wrong, you're creating content.
Do you think that's important in competitions as well? You know, potentially someone will be playing well, they can mess something up and start to go off and bringing it back. Do you think that might be good in the judge's eyes, or
I
even
love
just
seeing
as a
that.
spectator? Yeah.
Funny you say that. I love seeing that when someone is playing and they muff it up a bit and then they bring it back. To me, that has some drama in it. It also shows, you know, some cojones that they can do that and they're not getting flustered. And I find that, to me, that's traveling with the music. Because actually, it seems to me that in the end, a few flub notes is so inconsequential in life. But creating the music and keeping it going and not saying, oh, sorry guys, that was really bad, that's of no interest.
Yeah. Or stop and start over again. Just
Yeah.
doing that,
Or just look agonized,
yeah.
you know. Because when I was a kid playing piano, as we all did, and I would play a wrong note, my mother would, wherever my mother was in the house, she'd go, and so, and I just resisted that. I thought, so what, it's a wrong note.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world.
No, it just so is not the end of the world.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you.
yeah, thanks for doing the interview, and it was a really good read, so I hope some other people pick it up as well and enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.